Okay, so we went over the hallucinogenic toreador. Now let's look at the next thing we should be talking about is distortions or geometric optical illusions. All right, so this is an example of an illusion. It's called a Ponzo illusion. It's not by Dali, but just to show you the way that those yellow lines are painted or drawn, it looks like the one that is lower to the bottom of the image is actually smaller than the one that is on the upper part of the image. And the reason why is because we've used perspective here to draw your eye towards the center upper portion of the image. So as you can see, though, both lines that are yellow are of the same length. So that's called an optical illusion. There are several examples of optical illusions that Dali did and other artists did, but this is an example, in my opinion, of one of the first examples of an optical illusion with Dali, and this painting is called Girl with Curls. It is done in 1928, and what is kind of weird about it is if you look at where she is standing, she's actually not quite in the foreground like that rock in the lower right corner is. She's actually in the midground. And that's what makes her kind of strange, because it's hard to determine if she's a giant or if she's literally standing on a cliff. It's ambiguous at best. And we know Dali knows how to do perspective extremely well, so it's not a mistake. Once again, he's playing with you, the viewer, inviting you into his willed visions. Now, this piece is from 1926, so it really isn't a piece from the 40s, but it is, I did want to show you an example of Dali's use of an optical illusion. Okay, there's an example of paradox illusion. That's the next thing we're going to talk about. And I'm not sure why on the iPad some of these slides look a little bit weird, but this one is called M.C. Escher Ascending. This is not by Dali, it's by M.C. Escher. And what's paradox about that, or what doesn't really make sense, is if you follow the monks on the steps, if we view them closely and follow them along, we'll see that they never, ever go either, they keep on going upward bound or keep on going downward bound. So it doesn't make sense due to the way it's drawn, and that's because M.C. Escher is using what we call a one-sided figure to achieve that optical illusion. And by the way, M.C. Escher is probably one of the most skilled artists that do optical and paradox imagery. So here is an example of something that is paradoxical. I know we went over Enchanted Beach with 3 Fluid Graces before in class, but if you look at the figure that represents death out of the 3 fates, her head is literally a boulder. We're just making that to look like a boulder, we're just assuming that it's a head, but it's actually a boulder. The other 2 faces are called fictions, and we'll see that in a second. But I just wanted to show you that, it's not possible. The one that represents death, if you look at her hemline, it looks like it's of water. But the water is washing in and out of shore, creating the hemline. So is that water the shoreline, or is that her dress? What is it? So once again, our mind's putting pieces together that aren't quite necessarily there. And here's another example of a paradox. This is a portrait of both M.C. Escher and his wife. And we see here that it's really not a portrait at all, and it's not a face. What it is a ribbon that is wrapped around, made to look like his wife and himself. By the way, this was done well before the advent of Photoshop, so this is a skill in and of itself. M.C. Escher not only designed his own pieces, he also printed his own pieces, which, if you know anything about screen printing, is a very, very tedious and hard process to do. Screen print, lithographs, mezzotint, anything like that, you have to be a skilled person. And in fact, most people will draw their paintings and send it to a master who is good at lithographs. M.C. Escher was good at both. So to me, he's like one of the most ultimate artists because of that fact. And here's an example by Dali called Galatea of Spheres. Yes, this is a portrait of Gala, but is it really Gala? It's actually a bunch of spheres made to look like her face. So once again, this is before the advent of Photoshop, so Dali did a ton of sketch work to make this happen. I think this painting is quite beautiful. It is located at the Dali Museum in Spain. So if you ever are in Spain and near Barcelona, please go ahead and check out Figueres, because that is where the Dali Museum is. It's only about 45 minutes away, so it's worth your time. And also, another idea of double images are called fictions, and here is the movie poster for Premonition. Guys, I love Sandra Bullock to no end. I think she's super cool. However, this movie is not very good. I'm just going to be honest with you. I'd give it a solid C. It is mediocre at best. It's one of those movies where if you're not feeling well and you're sleeping on the couch and you're too lazy to, or not too lazy, but even too sick to get the remote and change the channel, that's what I'm talking about. So Premonition, why I included the movie poster is because if we look closely, we can see that the trees are composing her eyes. There are birds that are composing her nose. And there are birds and tree branches that are composing her lips. So our mind is making a face where one does not exist. So here's Dali's example of a fiction. Here, this is a watercolor. It is called Labyrinth. And we see a person on the stage. The curtains are being pulled back. And we see this lovely profile of a woman that is emerging from this. So it's quite lovely, quite beautiful. By the way, Dali did some other watercolor works for Vogue magazine. So any of you fashionistas out there, Vogue used to have covers that were done by artists, and there weren't any photographs on it of models or anything like that. So that's what Vogue used to look like. This particular one, Labyrinth, I'm not sure if it was on the front cover of Vogue or not, so please don't quote me on that. But like I said, he has done other works made out of watercolor on paper for Vogue magazine. I just wanted to mention it. Okay. All right, guys. So that was the double image portion of it. Now, remember I said the PC method was also conceptual. And I told you in class that we're going to look at clusters of associations and obsessions. In particular, we're going to look at William Tell and the Oedipus drama that gets merged together, and also Malaise Angelus. So those two things are what are going to be discussed in this portion. I might have to make another video just to let you know, because I don't want to make this one too long. So I'll go over William Tell and the Oedipal drama, and then I think I'm going to do another video just to finish this one out. So William Tell was basically based off of a legend. And the legend goes something like this, that he was an expert person with a bow and arrow. So an archer, that's the word I was looking for, an expert archer. And he would go out into the mountains and, catch food or hunt for food with his bow and arrow. So what had happened in William Tell's town was there's a newly appointed official, and this official was not a good person. He was a dictator, and he would make everybody take off their hats and place their hats on this hat rack in the middle of town square. So back in the old days, before the age of television or anything like that, people spent a lot of time socializing with each other. And that's why towns, especially in Europe, have town squares, because people would come out of their house and, after they were done eating dinner, would come out and socialize. So can you imagine there's a hat rack in the middle of this center of town? So William Tell and his son looked at the hat rack and were like, you know what, forget this, I'm not doing it. And of course, somebody squealed on them, and they both were sent to prison. So the dictator was like, hey, you know what? In his mind, he was like, I'm going to make a fool out of William Tell. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to offer William Tell and his son both immunity from prison, or he'd let them out. And he said, hey, William Tell, if I put an apple on your son's head, and if you're able to shoot it off your son's head, then you both get to go free. But you get one shot. So guys, you know, this apple is not very big. He set his son way far away, so it was unlikely that William Tell would make the shot. But William Tell accepted the challenge because the alternative was both his son and he would be sentenced to death. So he's like, you know what? I'll do it. So he pulls his arrow back and it strikes the apple dead center. So he and his son gain freedom. So that is the story of William Tell. Now, of course, Dali being Dali takes this story and really makes it his own. So he says that, no, my dad's not trying to save me. My dad is trying to kill me through repression and anxiety. So if you've read anything by Freud, he talks about Oedipal complex. And it comes from the story of Oedipus, who basically the story goes like this. There was a king and a queen, and they had a prophet, and the queen was pregnant. So the prophet, you know, basically told the king, hey, the son that your wife is about to have is going to kill you. So the king, when his son was born, told his guards to take the baby out and to kill the baby. So the guards took the baby outside of the kingdom, and instead of killing it, they wounded the baby so the baby would cry and left the baby near a village so that way somebody would pick him up. So the village brought back, the guards brought back their swords, but their swords had blood on it to show the king that they killed the baby, supposedly. So of course somebody in the village heard the baby, picked up the baby and gave it to a couple who couldn't have children, and this couple basically raised this child, and this child became very strong. And since the villages in this kingdom were being repressed, the villages had an uprising. And what happened is Oedipus, who was the king's son, ends up killing his dad. And he doesn't know it's his dad, but he kills him. And because it's the spoils of war, he ends up marrying the queen, who, by the way, is his mother. But he doesn't know that either. And he finally figures out that it's his mom, and he gorges his eyeballs out because he can't stand looking at himself in the mirror. So it's a Greek tragedy, of course. But Dali is saying that, you know, Oedipus kills his father. It's actually his father killing his son. So like I said, it takes on an Oedipal turn. And I'm going to stop the video here, and I'll start up with the next slides so that way you can watch those ones.